My life runs on a simple principle: predictability. I'm not a man of grand passions or wild risks. I'm a 40-year-old graphic designer living in a modest, two-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood in Central Florida. I work from home, I drive a sensible car, and my personal finances are managed with a precision that would make an accountant weep with joy. My budget is my fortress. Every dollar has a name, every expense is anticipated. In this carefully constructed world of financial order, my electric bill was always a known quantity, a boringly consistent pillar of my monthly planning, especially in the summer. Living in Florida, you learn to respect the sun and the heat that comes with it. You learn that your air conditioner is not a luxury, but a vital piece of life support equipment. But you also learn to be smart about it. My AC was a newer, high-efficiency model. The thermostat was a smart one, programmed to keep the house at a comfortable but not frigid 77 degrees during the day and a cooler 74 at night. I had blackout curtains on the windows that faced the afternoon sun. I was a responsible, rational user of electricity. My summer bills reflected that. They were always the highest of the year, of course, but they were predictably so. They'd creep up from the gentle $60 bills of the spring to around 180, maybe 220 if it was a particularly brutal August. I knew this number. I planned for this number. It was part of the cost of living in paradise. The email from Duke Energy arrived on a Wednesday morning, just like it always did. The subject line was the same innocuous: "Your bill is now ready to view." I clicked on it with the same casual indifference I always did, my mind already on a design project that was due that afternoon. The web page loaded. My eyes went to the big, bold number at the top of the page, and my brain simply refused to process it: $565.36. I stared at the screen, a low hum of cognitive dissonance in my ears. It was a mistake. It had to be a mistake. This wasn't a number that belonged in my reality. It was a bill for a different person, a different house, a house with a commercial walk-in freezer and a bank of crypto mining rigs in the garage. I blinked, took a sip of my coffee, and looked again: $565.36. The number didn't change. It sat there on the screen, an accusation. My first reaction was a surge of righteous, almost calm indignation. This was a simple, clerical error. These things happen. Some fat-fingered data entry clerk somewhere had obviously added a few extra digits. I would call them, point out the absurdity, they would apologize, and a corrected, sensible bill would be issued. I wasn't even angry yet. I was more amused. I spent the next hour preparing for my call with the kind of meticulousness I usually reserved for a major project. I logged into my account and downloaded the last 2 years of my billing statements. I created a spreadsheet, charting my kilowatt-hour usage month by month. The data was clear, consistent, and beautiful. It showed a rational, predictable pattern of consumption. There were no spikes, no anomalies. My usage for the most recent billing period was, in fact, almost identical to the same period the previous year. The bill for that period last year, $192.14. Armed with my spreadsheet, my historical data, and an unshakable sense of being right, I dialed the Duke Energy customer service number. I was put on hold, of course, and forced to listen to a tinny version of a pop song I didn't recognize. Finally, a cheerful-sounding woman named Brenda answered. I explained the situation with politeness and precision. I gave her my account number. I explained that my bill was nearly 3 times its normal amount. I told her that my usage history was consistent and that there must be an error with the billing or the meter reading. Brenda asked for a moment to review my account. I could hear the gentle clacking of her keyboard. I imagined her seeing the same data I was seeing, the same clear evidence of a mistake. I expected a gasp of surprise, an apology, a promise to fix it. What I got was a condescending sigh. "Well, sir," she began, in a tone one might use with a small child who doesn't understand why they can't have ice cream for breakfast. "It has been a very hot month here in Florida." I felt a flicker of irritation. "Yes, Brenda, I'm aware," I said, my voice still level. "I've lived here for 15 years. It's hot every summer, but my bill has never been this high. My kilowatt-hour usage, according to your own website, is consistent with last year. The problem isn't my usage. The problem is this bill for $565. Sir, your air conditioning is the largest consumer of electricity in your home," she continued, completely ignoring my point about the usage data. When it's this hot, your unit has to work much, much harder to maintain the temperature you have it set at. That's where these costs come from. It's your AC. The sheer, infuriating simplicity of her argument was stunning. She had a single, pre-approved answer, and she was going to stick to it, regardless of the facts. Brenda, I said, my politeness starting to fray, I understand how air conditioning works. What I am telling you is that your company has made a mistake. My recorded usage does not justify this charge. Is it possible there was a mistake with the meter reading? Our smart meters are fully automated and are rarely incorrect, sir, she said, the sir now sounding less like a courtesy and more like an insult. The bill is based on the usage reported by your meter. The amount is correct. I felt like I was in a Kafka novel. I had evidence, I had data, I had logic, and none of it mattered. I was talking to a wall that had been programmed with a single, unhelpful response. It's your AC. I want you to send a technician to my house to inspect the meter, I demanded, my voice rising. I am not paying a nearly $600 bill that is clearly an error. We can schedule a meter inspection, she said, her voice dripping with practiced weariness. But I have to inform you that if the technician finds the meter is functioning correctly, there will be a $75 service fee added to your next bill. And there it was, the corporate checkmate, the threat. Challenge us and we will charge you for the privilege of proving you wrong. It was a tactic designed to make you second-guess yourself, to make you doubt your own sanity, to make you give up and just pay the damn bill. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The calm, righteous indignation was gone, replaced by a feeling of profound, personal violation. This was no longer an amusing clerical error. This was a fight. Duke Energy hadn't just sent me an incorrect bill. They had insulted my intelligence, dismissed my evidence, and treated me like a fool. They had blamed me for their mistake, and I was not going to let them get away with it. The conversation with Brenda left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just her dismissiveness, it was the chilling realization that I was dealing with a system, not a person. A system designed to absorb complaints, deflect responsibility, and wear you down until you surrendered. But I am, if nothing else, stubborn. Their lazy, prescripted explanation, "It's your AC," became a personal insult, a challenge to my own rationality. So I decided to eliminate it as a variable, not for them, but for myself. I needed to be 100% certain that my fortress was secure before I went back to war. The next day, I called a highly rated, independent HVAC company. I explained that I wanted a full diagnostic and efficiency test on my central air unit. The technician, a guy named Marco with a friendly demeanor and forearms like steel cables, showed up that afternoon. He spent nearly 2 hours at my house. He checked the refrigerant levels, cleaned the coils, inspected the compressor, and ran a series of tests on the motor and fan. He crawled around in my sweltering attic to inspect the ductwork for leaks. He was thorough, professional, and when he was done, he gave me a clean bill of health. "Man, this unit is in great shape," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's running about as efficiently as a unit this size can. Your ducts are sealed tight. Whoever installed this did a good job." I felt a wave of vindication. "So there's no way this thing is suddenly drawing 3 times its normal power?" I asked. He laughed. "No way. If it was pulling that kind of amperage, it would be tripping your breaker constantly. It would probably be on fire. This unit is running exactly as it should." He charged me $150 for the inspection and the report, a report I now considered Exhibit A in my case against Duke Energy. It was a costly piece of paper, but it was proof. The problem wasn't my AC. With that variable eliminated, I turned my attention to the rest of the house. I was methodical. I went to the hardware store and bought a simple kilowatt meter, a device you plug into an outlet to measure the power draw of an appliance. I spent a whole evening going from outlet to outlet testing everything. My refrigerator was efficient. My work computer drew a reasonable amount of power. The television, the lights, the microwave, everything was within its expected range. There was no secret energy vampire hiding in my walls. My house was not the problem. Armed with my spreadsheet, my historical data, and Marco's official HVAC report, I felt ready for round 2. I called Duke Energy again. This time, I immediately asked to speak to a supervisor. After another lengthy hold, a man with a stern, impatient voice came on the line. I calmly and methodically laid out my case. I told him about my consistent usage history. I told him about the independent HVAC inspection. I offered to email him the paid invoice and the technician's report. I explained that I had personally audited the energy consumption of my home and that the bill was, without a shadow of a doubt, a mistake. I expected, at the very least, a moment of consideration, an acknowledgement of the effort I had put in. What I got was a brick wall of corporate condescension. "Sir," the supervisor said, his voice oozing with false patience, "I understand you've done your own research. However, we have a team of analysts who have reviewed the energy consumption in your area, and it is consistent with the high temperatures we experienced. As my colleague explained to you, your air conditioner is the cause." I felt my blood pressure skyrocket. He hadn't heard a word I said. He was reading from the same script as Brenda. He had dismissed Marco's professional report as my own research, as if I'd been consulting with tarot cards. "Did you not hear me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I have a professional report stating my AC is functioning perfectly. Your company's data shows my kilowatt-hour usage is the same as last year. The bill is the only thing that's different. How do you explain that?" "There are many factors, sir," he said, the vague, meaningless phrase a shield against logic. "Variable rate charges, fuel costs." "I have a fixed-rate plan," I shot back, "and fuel costs wouldn't account for a 200% increase. Can you please explain the specific charges that led to this bill?" He couldn't, of course. He just kept falling back on the same tired, infuriating refrain. "Sir, the bill is correct according to the meter reading." I felt a sense of surreal despair. I was trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare, an echo chamber of corporate doublespeak. They had their narrative, and my facts were an inconvenience they had no intention of acknowledging. I was being actively gaslit, told that my reality was wrong and theirs was right, simply because they had the power to say so. The supervisor ended the call by repeating the same offer as Brenda. They could send a technician, but if the meter was fine, I'd pay the $75 fee. It was clear that this was their only off-ramp, their only solution. It was a gamble, and they were betting I wouldn't take it, that I would just give up. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like defeat. "Schedule it, I'll take that bet." I hung up the phone, not with the triumphant fire I had felt after the first call, but with a cold, sinking feeling in my stomach. I had done everything right. I had gathered evidence. I had been rational, and I had been met with a wall of institutional arrogance. This wasn't a company I could reason with. This was an adversary I had to beat, and I was starting to realize just how much power they held and how little I had. The appointment for the meter inspection was a week away. That week was one of the most stressful of my life. My home, my sanctuary, now felt like a hostile territory. I became paranoid about my electricity usage, even though I knew it was pointless. I'd find myself sitting in the dark, sweating, just to feel like I was doing something. The number, $565.36, had taken up permanent residence in my head. It was more than a debt. It was a symbol of the injustice, a constant reminder of how powerless I was. My work suffered. I'd stare at a design project on my screen, but my mind would be elsewhere, replaying the conversations with the customer service reps, rehearsing the arguments I would make to the technician when he arrived. Sleep became a luxury. I'd lie awake at night, my mind racing, cycling through anger, anxiety, and a profound sense of frustration. This one bill was poisoning everything. It was a constant, low-level hum of stress that permeated every aspect of my day. I decided to channel that anxious energy into more research. If Duke Energy wouldn't listen to me, maybe they would listen to others. I plunged into the world of online consumer forums, local social media groups, and the Better Business Bureau website. And what I found was staggering. It wasn't just me. It was hundreds of people, thousands. The screen was a tapestry of rage and desperation. Story after story, almost identical to mine. People in small apartments getting $400 bills. Elderly couples on fixed incomes seeing their bills triple. Single mothers trying to figure out how to pay a $600 bill and still buy groceries. The details were all different, but the villain was the same, Duke Energy, and the excuse was always the same. "It's your AC." It was a systemic gaslighting campaign. We were all being told we were crazy, that our lived reality was wrong. But seeing all those stories together, I knew I wasn't crazy. I was just one of many. There was a grim comfort in that discovery. My problem wasn't a unique, isolated incident. It was a pattern of behavior from a company that felt it was untouchable. My fight was no longer just my fight. It was our fight. I started taking screenshots, saving links, and documenting the stories of others. I felt a sense of solidarity with these strangers on the internet. We were an unwilling community, a digital support group for the victims of predatory billing. I also took the next step. I filed a formal, detailed complaint with the Florida Public Service Commission, the state body that was supposed to regulate companies like Duke. I attached my spreadsheet, a copy of Marco's HVAC report, and links to a dozen other customer complaints. It felt like a significant official act. I was appealing to a higher power, a referee who could step in and call foul. The day the Duke technician was scheduled to arrive, I was a nervous wreck. I had all my paperwork laid out on the kitchen table like a lawyer preparing for trial. The technician, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, was polite but distant. He walked over to the smart meter on the side of my house, attached a device to it, and tapped on a tablet for about 5 minutes. The whole inspection was over in less time than it took to brew a pot of coffee. "Everything looks fine," he said, avoiding eye contact. "The meter is communicating with the network properly and the readings are within normal parameters." My heart sank. This was it. I had lost the bet. I was going to be hit with the $75 fee and the company would now have an official inspection on record to prove I was wrong. The system had won. "Did you actually test the meter's accuracy?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "Or did you just check if it was turned on?" "Sir, the diagnostic shows it is functioning as designed," he said, already backing towards his truck. And just like that, he was gone. The official verdict was in. I was wrong. The bill was correct. I was officially, according to them, the crazy one. A few days later, 2 things arrived. The first was a letter from the Public Service Commission. It was a form letter, stating they had received my complaint and had forwarded it to the utility for their review and response. It was a bureaucratic pass-the-buck, a meaningless gesture. The second thing was my next electric bill. It was for $588.12. They had added the $75 service fee. I looked at the new bill, at the PSC's empty letter, and something inside me snapped. The anxiety and the fear were burned away by a clean, cold rage. They had done everything they could to corner me, to prove me wrong, to make me pay. They had the inspectors, the supervisors, and the regulators all on their side. But they didn't have the truth. I walked to my desk, took out my checkbook, and wrote a check to Duke Energy. I wrote it for $200, the approximate amount my bill should have been. I put it in the mail with the payment slip. On the memo line, I wrote, "Payment for actual services rendered, disputing fraudulent overcharges." It was a declaration of war. I knew what was coming next: threatening letters, automated calls, damage to my credit score. But I didn't care anymore. I was done playing by their rules. They had pushed me too far. I was going to fight them on my terms now, and I was going to be louder. My act of partial payment was like kicking a hornet's nest. The automated calls started within days, a relentless, robotic voice reminding me my account was seriously past due. Then came the letters, printed on increasingly alarming shades of red and pink paper, warning of service interruption and collections activity. They were trying to intimidate me, to bury me in an avalanche of automated threats. But something had shifted in me. Seeing the sheer volume of other people suffering the same fate had transformed my fear into a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my $565 anymore. It was about the principle. I continued to meticulously document everything, every letter, every call log. I also continued my crusade online, but now with a new goal. I wasn't just looking for support. I was looking for a weapon. And in today's world, the most powerful weapon a consumer has is public exposure. I started researching local news stations in my area, looking for the ones with consumer watchdog segments, the on-your-side reporters who took on big companies on behalf of their viewers. I found one, a reporter with a reputation for being a tenacious bulldog when it came to consumer rights. I spent an entire evening crafting an email to him. It was the most important piece of writing I had ever done. I laid out the entire story, from the first shocking bill to the dismissive customer service, the independent HVAC report, the useless official inspection, and the final, insulting addition of the service fee. But I didn't just tell my story. I included a dozen links to social media groups and forum threads showing this was a widespread, systemic issue. I attached my spreadsheet, a scan of Marco's report, and screenshots of other customers' desperate pleas. I wasn't just a disgruntled customer, I was a case study, complete with evidence. I hit send and felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. 2 days later, I got a reply. It was from the reporter's producer. They were interested. They wanted to talk. The phone call with the producer was a breath of fresh air. She listened. She asked intelligent questions. She didn't once suggest my AC was to blame. For the first time, I felt like I was being heard by someone who had the power to do something. They scheduled an interview. A news van, a machine I had only ever seen at a distance, parked in front of my little bungalow. The reporter was sharp, empathetic, and visibly angry on my behalf as I walked him through my stack of evidence. He filmed an interview with me in my living room, the pile of bills and reports on the coffee table between us. I was nervous, but I spoke from the heart, telling my story of frustration and helplessness. The news station's investigation team then did what I, as an individual, never could. They contacted Duke Energy's corporate communications department, not the customer service line. They didn't ask about my bill. They informed them they were running a story on systemic billing issues, featuring my case specifically. The effect was instantaneous. The machine, which had been grinding me down for months, suddenly lurched into reverse. Less than 24 hours after the news station made their call, my phone rang. The caller ID said Duke Energy, but this was not the number I had been calling. The man on the other end introduced himself as being from the Executive Resolutions Department. His tone was not condescending or dismissive. It was a tone of deep, urgent concern. Suddenly, they were very, very interested in my own research. He apologized profusely for my experience. He promised a full, high-level internal review. He told me they were dispatching their own senior field technician to my home the very next day at no charge to conduct a comprehensive audit. The senior technician was a different breed from the first guy. He spent 2 hours at my house. He didn't just plug a tablet into the meter. He removed the meter from the wall, ran a series of complex diagnostics on it, and inspected the physical housing. And then he found it. Deep within the meter's logs, he discovered a fault. A malfunctioning component had been causing the meter to intermittently send out packets of massively inflated usage data. It wasn't happening all the time, which is why the first technician's simple check didn't catch it, but it was happening often enough to nearly triple my bill for 2 consecutive months. It was the smoking gun, the truth. The problem was never my AC. It was their faulty equipment, just as I had suspected from day one. The aftermath was a whirlwind of corporate apologies. My bill was corrected. The fraudulent charges, the late fees, the service fee, all of it was wiped away. They gave me a credit on my account for the inconvenience. The news story aired, featuring my victory and a statement from Duke Energy about their commitment to billing accuracy. My personal battle was won. But as the dust settled, the victory felt strangely hollow. I had been right all along. I had the data, the logic, and the evidence from the very beginning, yet I had been ignored, dismissed, and bullied for months. I only got justice because I was stubborn enough to fight, privileged enough to have the time and resources to do so, and lucky enough to get a news reporter's attention. What about all the other people? The elderly couple, the single mother? The hundreds of others who didn't have the energy for that fight, who were forced to choose between electricity and groceries, who simply gave up and paid. My bill was fixed, but the broken, arrogant system that had created the problem in the first place was still there. And that's the truth that stays with me. Thanks for listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how global our community is. Comment your country down below. Share this story to your friends and leave a like and subscribe for more episodes like this.